We're going to go through this mock draft in T-minus 1,563. Now 1,562, 1,561.
A few minutes later.
727, 726.
One eternity later.
Well, that's going to do it here for the mock draft today. Let me know what you think. Is coolin'? What's going on? Okay, cool. I didn't fast forward too far this time. But hey, what's going on, you guys? I hope you're doing really well. And we got a mock draft to go over today. And we did a mock draft yesterday. I'm kind of curious today where some of these other folks in the community have players going after the combine. So we're going to get into it, see what we got here with Jordan Reed, who just got a 2-round mock draft up here. I don't think I've gone through a 2-round mock draft from ESPN just yet. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive into this the mock edition here. Starting off with Jordan Reed talking about the NFL Combine. It's over. We're almost into free agency. I can't wait, man. Let's go. I love free agency time period. And you start off with a trade. Okay, he's got the Giants jumping in the top spot. I'm hearing some rumors about this stuff. It seems like if there's anybody that's going to jump up, it's going to be the New York Football Giants. They're the most desperate for the quarterback situation. Now, Sam Darnold has already they've come out and said, look, he's not giving him a franchise tag. We'll see if he wants to come back to New York or if Tennessee ends up getting him. I think that would be the preferred landing spot I mentioned for Sam Darnold. As this is saying, though, I kind of like the Aaron Rodgers signing to the Giants rather than trading up here. That's just my opinion. Overall, from what I'm hearing after the Combine is that Cam Ward, which is what this pick is going to be. Now, in terms of the draft capital, it's going to be a 2nd rounder in this draft, a 3rd rounder in 2026, and that's it. Okay, so I guess it's not terrible all in all. That's not too bad, actually. As long as it's not a future 1st rounder, I can get on board with this draft capital for moving up. That's not terrible, actually. So, and it may not cost as much as we think, because if for example, the Titans, they are set on Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, or even Mason Graham, then you can just say to yourself and very much convincingly be like, okay, I'm cool with getting a 2nd rounder and a 3rd rounder next year for that compensation because we're going to take that guy at number 1 overall anyway. So it's a win-win scenario. You're still getting more draft capital. You don't have to get a 1st rounder next year. If I was the GM, I'd be cool with whatever. If I could get a 2nd round pick, I'm vibing with that. That's going to help build our roster. So in general, I think this is a win-win move for both sides if this was the case for the Giants. If you can't get Aaron Rodgers or whatever happens and you have to get a quarterback, at least you don't give up and mortgage the future and a 1st round pick. So that way, if you're terrible next season, well, you still can get a quarterback in next year's draft or whatever, right? But with this, Cam Ward is clearly the quarterback 1 after the Combine and all the rumors, all the talk. I still like Shedeur Sanders a lot, but from everything going by that even Jackson Dart is very close in that number 2 conversation, and some teams could value Jackson Dart over Shedeur Sanders and maybe even Jalen Milroe or, Tyler Shucks. So those are all question marks to keep an eye out as we continue in this mock draft. But Cam Ward to the Giants after trading up makes a lot of sense. And then the Cleveland Browns go Shedeur Sanders. This is a really tough one, right? Because you can say, well, do you go quarterback here? I like Shedeur Sanders. I was mentioning it before. He's still my top quarterback in this draft class. I just feel like he has the highest floor in this draft, and he's somebody that I really do like as a person as well. Like, I'm not worried about the off-the-field stuff with Shedeur Sanders people talk about. I think it's a baloney and not in the good way of like sandwiches-wise or anything like that. Like, I don't know. I don't see the whole drama thing that he stirs up there. It's not like he's a drama king. Just think, he grew up in a different situation than a lot of people did, so he had to deal with spotlight and things like that, so I'm not going to hold that against him. But going strictly on field and what he needs to work on, still needs to get better in the pocket and hanging in there sometimes. I feel like his pocket awareness, drifting back is a bit of a problem, but he's not afraid to take a hit. He is an accurate quarterback. I think he's the most accurate quarterback too in this draft class. So for the Browns, if you're going after a quarterback, I'm fine with this. It just comes down to, do you feel confident taking Shedeur Sanders at number 2? Like, for me personally, I wouldn't necessarily love taking him at number 2. As much as I like Shedeur Sanders, I feel better at like 22 rather than 2. So if you can trade back up in the 1st round or use like a Myles Garrett pick and get Shedeur Sanders there, like that makes a lot more sense than the number 2 overall pick. That would be my only pushback to this draft pick for the Cleveland Browns, not as a need strictly. Tennessee here, they go get basically the same player I would imagine that they won at number 1 overall by trading. That's why I say it's a win-win scenario. And you get Abdul Carter here, the Penn State edge rusher, just an easy move with Harold Landry probably on the way out now and the trade rumors that he's facing at this point. Arden Key going to last year of his contract. They need to juicify that edge up with Abdul Carter. New England Patriots going Travis Hunter. Easy move for them. It's the best player in the draft class, in my opinion. I think Travis Hunter comes into this football team, probably plays wide receiver more often than he does corner for this football team right away, but he would also be an addition into their secondary with Jonathan Jones being a free agent. They're trying to work some deal out with him right now. At least that's the rumor. But once again, like they still could use some more help in both departments. So this would be a great situation for Drake May and for their defense and Mike Vrabel. That's an A+ move. And then we go on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Mason Graham, the interior rusher from Michigan, the Wolverine. James Gladstone, the ever youngster who could probably play football himself. He's still, looks like he's 24 years old out there. Get themselves some help on the interior defensive line. Yeah, the blueprint for the Rams, getting some young players there for them, and now they do the same. Mason Graham, you got Mason Smith, you got Jordan Jefferson. You're building a young core on that defense line. I'm fine with it. It's BPA. Mason Graham, the best available player, in my opinion, at this point on the board. No problem with that. Even though they have invested a lot into that, I could see them maybe holding off, trying to let some of those guys develop. But at the same time, I think Mason Graham's a different beast and a different animal. Then we go on to the Raiders. I like this move here for the Raiders. Ashton Jeanty, you go get Pete Carroll, that Marshawn Lynch in their Beastquake going over to Vegas now. Ashton Jeanty going to bring some bolder news. He's going to bring Avalanche. Avalanche! That's what they'll be calling it over there. Anyway, I love it. I think it's an A+ move, even though you talk about, running backs, whatever. I ain't worried about that. I think Jeanty is one of the best players in this draft class in terms of what he's going to bring to the table. It's just too much to pass up. And then we go on to the New York Shedeur Stewart. Okay, let's dive through this one. Stewart's been the big talk at the town and Combine, Senior Bowl. This past couple of months for him, couple of months have been huge for his draft stock. He's gone from possibly a late first rounder, second rounder to a top 10 pick. He's a freak athlete. You can't deny that. 40+ inch vertical, 4.59 speed. Like those numbers are ridiculous. They are literally Myles Garrett type of number. Now, is he near the production of Myles Garrett coming out of college? No, but he's a super young player, only 20 years old. You have to understand that the upside with this guy is through the roof. And as a Jets fan, I'm okay with it. I'm not loving it. I would rather go with like an Armin Embu or a Will Campbell personally. But at the same time, I really do like Shedeur Stewart and his upside there. He's a young player, as I mentioned. If you're going to go and add another pass rusher with his level of upside, I can definitely deal with it. And also the Jets are a team that I don't think is in win now mode anyway. With AG coming in first year, Darren Muji, this is a find guys that fit your scheme. That's really what it is. So if Shedeur Stewart fits the personality that you're looking for in that locker room, then this is an A+ move. I have no problem with that. It's finding guys that want to play for New York and want to be a Jet, right, under Aaron Glenn and this new regime. And another thing is, of course, with the pressure numbers, that's important too, right? The sacks aren't everything. The 2.43 second top the FBS, that shows that there's a lot of production still to be had. And I agree with that. Like certain metric, it's not always about sacks. Sacks are overrated in general. Then you got it's important, don't get me wrong. Carolina Panthers go Mikael Williams, the Georgia edge rusher here, and they get themselves another guy who adds that upside into the room, and they clearly need a pass rusher, whether it's James Pierce Jr., Mikael Williams, Jalen Walker, you name it. Like you go find a guy that you feel comfortable with, that you like for your system. And if Mikael Williams is that guy, then Mikael Williams is that guy. He's another one that's 20 years old, super young player. And he has sky-high potential with his athletic profile and length and things like that. So, it is what it is, right? You wonder about the production. You worry about that a little bit. He was injured this season too, so wasn't quite able to show as much production as maybe you would like, but certainly has all the tools. And then Tyler Warren to the New Orleans Saints is another one where I could see this pick happening for sure. Tyler Warren, one of the best players in this draft class, period. Not just, position tight end. No, he is one of the best players in this entire draft class. And for NOLA, man, this new regime, if they go give themselves a Dallas Goedert here, that's maybe what Kellen Moore is thinking. Let's go get a versatile piece with Tyler Warren. I certainly don't mind this one. They've got a lot of variable holes they could look at for that New Orleans Saints team. They could go offensive line. They could go defensive line. So multiple areas. They could go quarterback even if one of those quarterbacks falls to them. A lot of areas that they could be looking at. But I do think Tyler Warren is a fine pick. Like that, you're really you're hitting an A+ there. And then on to the Bears, Armin Embu, the offensive tackle, Missouri. Only question I have here is, would he slide him over to left tackle? The Bears already have a right tackle in Darnell Wright, so I'm thinking of Darnell Mooney. Embu would be sliding over to have competition with Braxton Jones at left tackle or start at one of the guard positions, which would be fine too, right? I mean, if you wanted to, you could roll in next season with Braxton Jones as your left tackle and Embu as one of your starting guards. And long term, you would figure Embu would slide to left tackle for the future. Just depends on how you want to work that. You go best offensive lineman. I think Will Campbell would be a really good pick too for them. No matter what, offensive line seems like going to be a huge priority for Ben Johnson. Hey, he knows a good thing about good offensive linemen and having a good offensive line, what that means to your football club. So that one's solid, right? There might be a little complications on where Embu plays early on, but in general, offensive line is the top need. We go on to Will Johnson here, the Wolverine, going to the San Francisco 49ers. I really like this pick. I know they haven't seemed to invest early draft capital. When I mean early draft, like first-round picks in the quarterback position. You have Ronaldo Green. You have DeMar Lenore now under contract. Could they add Will Johnson in here? Absolutely. Like, this would be a seamless transition from Charvarius Ward. Wish him the best. And then Will Johnson in here as that other third corner. Like, that gives you more size on the perimeter too. And that allows Lenore/Green to work inside and out. So it's a really good pick. Like, schematically wise, I think it's an excellent overall view of that. It's just determine what do they want to do, right? Do they want to go get a veteran in free agency and then go defensive line in the draft, get younger there? Offensive line too is very much in the cards as well. They could look at Will Campbell, who's still on the board at this point, Josh Simmons, Josh Connolly, like all those guys certainly in play. They're going to have to get their free agency approach in play and then go into the draft with that approach. And that's why I'm saying I think corner, defensive line, and offensive line, those are your three position groups that you're looking at depending on how free agency looks at it. And then the Cowboys go Tetairoa McMillan. This is one that I did in my mock draft yesterday and have kind of been doing lately. I think McMillan would be a great add for this Dallas Cowboy team. Yes, they did add Jonathan Mingus. They gave up a 4th-round pick on this. So you might be saying, well, is it realistic that they give up another draft pick in a first-round selection, spending all that draft capital, a premium into it? It is a good question, right? I think that there is a chance that Jerry Jones maybe sticks with Jonathan Mingo for a season, plays a little hardball with that, sees what he has, and then maybe decision-making from there, and you can make that ultimate choice on whether you want to draft a receiver in next year's draft class. But yeah, I like Tetairoa McMillan. You pair him up with CeeDee Lamb, that guarantees you a good playmaking receiving room for Dak Prescott, which is such a problem, right? They need to address that. It is a huge glaring hole for this roster and something they need to do improve next season. Then on to the Miami Dolphins. I love this pick. You go get Will Campbell, the offensive tackle from LSU. I think he plays tackle at the next level. But he could also play guard. So I'm not worried about this. Plus, he's a great run blocker. He's got a good first step. He's a really good athlete. So he fits Mike McDaniel's scheme. No problem about this. And he would come in right. And at the end of the day, if I had to guess a landing spot for Will Campbell after the combine, maybe some teams will be a little scared about the arm length. I think this will be his floor. I really do. I do not think he makes it past Miami at 13. So it's great scheme fit. It's exactly what they need on their offensive line. He could play left tackle for them, compete with Patrick Paul too for that left tackle position for the future, and if not, be a good guard for them. Indianapolis Colts go Colston Loveland here, the tight end from Michigan. Now, they don't get Tyler Warren in this mock draft, but they go get Michigan Wolverine, Colston Loveland. Also a very good pick for the Colts, which they clearly use tight ends and the run game as well as in the pass game. They just haven't really had a good pass catcher, consistent pass catcher for them. Grenson's been a little inconsistent, not quite the blocker either. Now, Loveland was starting to improve in that department. Mo Cox and also Drew Ogletree have really been their best blockers. But Loveland certainly has the upside. He's got the frame to do it. He's more of a receiving element, and that's really what you're drafting, especially at 14. Overall, not bad. I think you could go a couple of different routes. Depends on, if they re-sign Julian Blackman. This could even be the early spot Nicky Manwari or Malachi Starks. Those type of guys start looking at the board. Maybe a small trade back too. Corner, also another area they could be looking at. Let's go on to the Atlanta Falcons. Jalen Walker, the edge rusher from Georgia, makes a lot of sense. They need more pass rush. Jalen Walker is a very polarizing polarizing prospect in general. Elite traits, but the production is not quite elite. In my opinion, the production is more second-round grade. The traits are top 10 level traits. So it just comes down to balancing the traits versus the production, just like with some of these other guys like Shamar Stewart and Mikael Williams. How do you value those guys? Now, my only real pushback for this pick, would he fit with Jeff Ulbrich's new scheme coming in, who's going to play probably more base 4-3 type of defense? That's why, I would say that maybe more of a Landon Jackson type of profile or Mikael Williams, Shamar Stewart. Those are the type of guys that I would see fitting his scheme a little bit more than Jalen Walker. I'm not saying that he can't fit in or can't work out. Remember, they got Will McDonald in that scheme and he fit him pretty well. So, I'm not super worried. They just need more pass rush, right? We'll see what they do in free agency as well. Arizona Cardinals, they go get Kenneth Graham. Love this pick. I think it's a really solid move for the Cardinals. And whoever gets Kenneth Grant, I think is going to get a very high floor player, somebody that's going to come right in and be a staple at nose for the next 8 years for their football team. And the Cards, that's what they need, right? They need somebody that can stop the run, but he'll also add pass rush upside too for that defense. They've got guys, you pair him up with Darius Robinson next to him, that's just going to allow Robinson to go after the quarterback more consistently, get one-on-ones. Grant's going to eat up those doubles. And then we go on to the Bengals here with Walter Nolan, another defensive tackle going off the board here. Nolan would, you pair him up next to Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson. Okay, that's a really good group. I still lean personally towards them getting a free agent defensive tackle because you got a lot of youth. At the same time, though, I don't have a problem. If they want to go get a Kenneth Grant, a Walter Nolan, whatever, that's fine. It's just defensive tackle is a bit of a grown man sport. So if they're going to try to say, hey, let's improve in the run game right now, will Walter Nolan do that? Possibly, yes. But at the same time, I do think NFL level. It's different level strength profile. Walton Nolan, I expect him to be a good run defender, at least at some point, maybe early on. And he was at Ole Miss. He was an excellent run defender. So I do think some of those things will translate. And he'll certainly add some pass rush juice to that defensive line. At the same time, like I said, that typically takes a little bit of time. You'll have to be like a Jalen Carter type of freak to hit the ground running. Braden Fisk, those guys don't come around all the time. I do think, Walter Nolan certainly can hit the ground running. So we'll see how things work there. I also like them adding a vet free agent, maybe going after, offensive line, edge rusher, even secondary safety, a big area. Nick Emanwar, Malachi Stark. Seattle, they go Tyler Booker here. Now, Booker's going to fall a little bit, I imagine, after the combine. So that's going to be something to keep an eye out on. We'll see how far that drop does fall. But it's a great fit for Seattle. They need offensive line. Like, no matter what, like, they're going to have to improve, whether it's Gray Zabel, a Kelvin Banks Jr., you name it, like, whoever's on the board. Improving the offensive line is the top priority. They have to run the ball way more consistently next season. Let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they're going Jahad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama. I'm a huge Jahad Campbell fan. I think that this guy's going to be an absolute stud playmaker for whoever gets him. And as a blitzer, of course, he's going to give you that ability. And I think Todd Bowles is one of the better scheme fits for Jahad Campbell in this entire draft, because Campbell will blitz, or Todd Bowles will let Campbell blitz and go after the quarterback, whether it's up the A-gap, off the edge. Like, he's going to utilize that skill set of Jahad Campbell as good as anybody in the league. That's why I really do love this fit, and it makes a lot of sense. You pair him with a great all-pro, not just all-pro, Hall of Famer in Levante David for maybe a season or two, and yeah, I'm cool with that, man. You got Savache Dennis, like, that would be a good group of three, and you can get all three of those guys out on the football field because, hey, Campbell can rush the passer. He can go off the edge. Like, you can utilize him in multitude of roles. So he'll also help the pass rush as well as the linebacker position and coverage-wise. And then the Denver Broncos, Nick Emanwar. This is a mock draft pick that I've done quite a bit through the entirety of this process. Now, it's never been in the first round. That's the thing. But with the combine, his tape is so good too. Like, he's going in the first round. I've been putting this guy in the second, third round. The disrespect, right? G-slang, unbelievable. But here I go talking about myself in the third person. But anyway, Nick Emanwar would be a sneaky need for this football team to pair along with Brandon Jones and just solidify that secondary. And it seems like Sean Payton's been looking for guys like this too. Somebody that can cover tight ends, be that ultimate chess piece in the back end. So Emanwar would fit that skill set perfectly for them. And then we go on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, go Matthew Golden, who had a great combine, a 4.3, or was it even 4.29? I think it was 4.3, but really fast combine time. And it shows up on speed too. It's not just, with the no pads and stuff like that. With pads, he's one of the smoothest route runners in this draft class. And the Steelers are clearly going to be in the wide receiver market, where I hear rumors of Darius Slayton's going to be a very potential candidate for them. They need to improve the wide receiving room. And so until going forward, until maybe they pick up a big free agent, they're going to need to be addressing this wide receiver. But it was such a problem. You can put the blame on Russell Wilson all you want, but at the same time, their lack of weapons was very glaring. And I do think they're going to have to, that's a number one priority, I would say, even at this point right now for the Steelers. Let's go on to the Los Angeles Chargers. You got Amari Hampton, the North Carolina running back, who I certainly think would be a really nice add for this football team. At the same time, though, I just feel like it's not their number one priority. Harbaugh does want to run the football, so upgrading the running back room makes a lot of sense. I do think J.K. Dobbins ends up coming back on another one-year contract, but it's too soon to, he might get a deal somewhere else. But at the same time, I think that you need to add somebody else no matter what, because Gus Edwards at this point, I don't feel comfortable him being, able to carry a workload or anything like that. And J.K. Dobbins, throughout his injury history, you still have to look at that and consider it. And they're going to have to look long-term no matter what. So I like the add of running back. I would just say I like the idea better of getting like an interior defensive lineman, maybe even another pass rusher, adding in a potentially even another weapon, whether it's a tight end or a wide receiver, even possibly. Like a Luther Burden here would be pretty cool. The tight ends, both the top tight ends are off the board, so I totally get not going there. But at the same time, interesting area to look at it. Amari Hampton's still a good football player, and I could definitely see him going in the first round. Green Bay goes Derek Harmon, interior passers from Oregon. This is an interesting one here. Hey, Harmon's a really good football player. I still like their interior of the defense line. Like, I would love for them to pick up a nose tackle in free agency, or really just bring back Shedeur Sanders. They're going to need a good run defender there. Harmon would certainly elevate that room even more with Kenny Clark, who I will say Kenny Clark at this point didn't have his greatest season, but at the same time, it deals with more double teams and things like that. You got Carl Brooks, a young extending player. Devontae Wyatt was really their best pass rusher in this full season. You got Colby Wood and Kalila inside out. Derek Harmon would add another stud on that defensive line. So they need to add more pass rush. Like, clearly that was a glaring issue for them this season. They were very inconsistent off the edge. I would love for them to add a speed rusher too off the edge. that is an area that they could be looking at, as well as another wide receiver, possibly as well as center too. And then we go on to the Minnesota Vikings. Skull. They go Jahdae Barron. If you lose Byron Murphy, well, fit right in with Jahdae Barron. They're kind of clones in many ways. They're good football players. Jahdae Barron's going to give you versatility to cover in the slot and on the outside. That's what Byron Murphy did. So you add in a ultimate chess piece with Jahdae Barron, especially if they're going to continue to play a lot of zone, right? And if they want to play more man coverage, then they could look elsewhere, right? There's other areas that they could look at, but for the most part, Brian Flores did play a lot more zone coverage, and I think Jahdae Barron fits right in, even though he can play man coverage too. But I think that, especially with his speed, you add in Jahdae Barron, he's going to be a really nice playmaker for that secondary. Those Lasso-in Texans are up next here at 25. They get Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas, which, if you get Kelvin Banks Jr., my only question, and the only reason why I've really struggled drafting offensive linemen is like, where do they play right away? I mean, Shaq Mason could be a cut candidate. I could definitely see that. But at the same time, like, where is Kelvin Banks going to play? You got a lot of young guys in there. And that's why I maybe would lean towards going the free agency route of this. You've got guys like Jared Patterson, Drew Shrugs. Yeah, you got some experience in there, but you got Blake Fisher, a second-round pick in this last draft. Are you giving up on him because it says that he would play right tackle in this scenario? So in a way, it's almost like you're saying, Blake, sorry, we drafted you, but we don't really believe in you. You're going to ride the bench again. So those are all tricky scenarios. Like, at the same time, I understand you got to improve the offensive line. It was a problem. At the same time, I think that they need more weapons, and that would help CJ Stroud get the ball out quicker and improve the offensive line inadvertently because of that. So it's the whole argument of how much is it the offensive line? How much is it the lack of weapons, the injuries that they had, and going forward, with Stephon Diggs coming off an ACL, Tank Dell possibly out for the majority of the season? Those are big questions for me, and that would be my only pushback. Banks is a good player, though, and I certainly don't hate the idea of taking him. Here, speaking of receiver, Emeka Buka. What a great pick here for the Rams, especially if they don't get a Devontae Adams in free agency or whatever, right? Then if you get Emeka Buka in the draft, you pair him up with Puka Nacua, and you're building something that would be an insane group. Also, Emeka Buka is a tough-nosed blocker as well, so he fits right in with the Sean McVay style of system. So I have no problem with this pick, and it is something that I could see them going after as another playmaker, depending on free agency. You got corner, you got wide receiver, maybe even a tight end later in the draft. Maybe not first round unless one of those top guys fall to you. You can get by with Higbee and Colby Parkinson. It could be an area upgrade, though, at some point. Anyway, like, I liked it. I mean, I think it's a fine pick for them. Then you go on to the Baltimore Ravens. They go Malachi Starks, a safety prospect from Georgia. They add just, kind of a BPA player who had a really solid combine, looked extremely fluid during the drills. He's going to be another versatile chess piece in their secondary. I imagine he would play more of the back end and allow Kyle Hamilton to play that Kyle Hamilton role in the slot, in the box, and what he does best. However, Malachi Starks certainly not going to be any schmuck to be able to do anything like that either. So you add in a guy that's going to be a beast in that back end and be a long-term replacement there for Marcus Williams. And then we go on to the Detroit Lions. You got Donovan Ezeraku. This is one I just did, I believe, in my mock draft yesterday as well. I love it. I think Ezeraku is an underrated player in this draft class. And at the end of the day, I think he's going to outperform some of the guys drafted in front of him. He is one of the twitchiest athletes in this draft class. Like, you talk about the spin move, it's Will McDonald level. You talk about those inside counter moves, like Micah Parsons, it's got that level of, like, he has that level of athleticism. Like, I wouldn't say like explosive. He does not have Micah Parsons level of explosiveness, but he has Micah Parsons level of twitchiness in inside moves. When you look on film and what he brings to the table, he just isn't quite that level of explosiveness. Like, if he was Micah Parsons 4.4 speed, he'd be going top 5 in this draft. Like, legit, I think he would go top 5. He just doesn't quite have that level. Anyway, I think this would be a great 1-2 punch with Aiden Hutchinson. I really do. Then we go on to Commanders. They also go pass rusher. They go Mike Green. Mike Green's another one of those guys that's just so polarizing where he ends up going into. I see him all over the place, all over big boards, from top 10 to back of the first round. It's just so hard to project with Mike Green a little bit. At the same time, like, the production with Mike Green is insane. I'm hearing some off the field stuff. I don't know. It's like, what do you take for granted? I wasn't there. I don't know the whole scenario, the whole situation. So it's hearsay here, who says what. And sometimes people are just looking for attention too. So it's just like, it's so tough to project with all this stuff. Hey, you could look at somebody and almost go like, hey, and someone like, you waved at me? Oh my gosh, this guy, hey, he's got anger issues. Saying, who knows? But anyway, great pick in terms of who's available and adding another pass rusher for the Commanders. And then we go on to the Buffalo Bills, Maxwell Harrison. I think he probably ends up going in the first round after that combine, right? The fastest time, 4.28, and he shows it on film. Now, I still think he needs to work on his press coverage ability. That is something that he needs to get stronger at. So stronger receivers are going to give him a little bit of a headache early in his career. However, You talk about the athleticism, Mike. I will not deny that. He is one of the most fluid corners in this draft class. Denzel Ward was his, kind of comp when they were out there at the combine, and the measurables are so identical. The speed, the athletic profile. And for the Bills, they certainly could add another playmaker. And it's a good 1-2 punch because you got your more physical guy with Benford on the outside. So Benford, Harrison, and then Johnson in the slot. Like, that'd be a really good group of 3. So if they want to do that, I think that's a really good pick for them. Then the Kansas City Chiefs, they go Josh Simmons. This is a pick I did as well in my mock draft yesterday. I love it. I think that if he falls to here because of the injuries, Kansas City, you finally found your left tackle of the future, and you can a little bit of rejoice there because they've been looking for it now for the past couple of years. And Josh Simmons, it just comes down to, do you feel he's going to make a full recovery? And I don't see why he won't. And he's a hardworking guy. He's continue to get better and better each and every season. And you find yourself that long-term solution. So I love that pick. That's an A+ move for the Kansas City Chiefs, and could end up a really good steal for them. Final pick of the Philadelphia Eagles go James Pierce Jr. Oh my gosh, talk about a steal. You're just letting the 2 best teams get these kind of football players? These are both top 10 players, in my opinion. Unbelievable. So now the Eagles have a rotation of Nolan Smith, Bryce Huff, Jalen Hunt, and now James Pierce Jr. It is what it is. This is an A+ move. Plus, if I want to add to that, an elite athlete. Yeah, it needs to get a little stronger, just like Nolan Smith. Maybe early in his career, he's more of a situational pass rusher. It's no problem for them. They'll develop this guy into the next Nolan Smith All-Pro potential guy. Okay, let's move on to round number 2, though. We got the Browns going Travion Henderson, the running back from the Ohio State University. And it looks like Andrew Berry has already stated that Nick Chubb will be allowed to test free agency. Unfortunately, that's the way of the business. He's getting a little bit older now, coming off a significant knee injury. I'd love to see him back, if nothing else, just on a cheap 1-year contract or something like that. But they're going to have to look at investing in this running back room no matter what. And this draft class is the one to do that. Travion Henderson, I think he could easily make the argument of him as the number 2 running back in this draft class. Like, he's right neck and neck with Amari Hampton. I even have him over Hampton. Henderson is so explosive, and he gets up to top speed like that, man. And I think he would really add a great addition for their running back room. So I like that move. I think it's worth that pick too. And the Titans go Luther Burden. So you know what? I thought I was crazy by having Luther Burden fall into the second round, and it definitely is a possibility. It's something that it wouldn't shock me. I think Burden is 100% a first-round talent. It just comes down to some of the lack of, consistency this past season from Missouri, and that offense really is hurting his draft projection. So even Theo Weiss was actually probably their best receiver in general, I thought, from watching Missouri games this season. However, talent, Burden is just, he's got all the talent, the athletic profile, obviously the yak ability, continue to clean up the route running, get better, but he reminds me a lot of a DJ Moore, and he's going to be a vertical presence as well. And for the Titans, why not? This is best available player. You're getting a guy with the talent to be a true number 1 wide receiver to pair along with Calvin Ridley. And if you bring back Nico Westbrook-Ikhine, then you got a solid group of 3. So that's an A+ value. And then the Titans here, this was the trade, remember, from the Giants. So they get this Giants pick. They get Gray Zabel. This would be an A+ draft for the Titans. Like, literally, they win the draft. I'm going to say this right now. They get Abdul Carter, you get Gray Zabel, and Luther Burden III. Congratulations, Titans. You did it. You win the draft. That is unbelievable. Oh, my gosh. He'd slide over to right guard, and boom, you're good to go. You get a right tackle in free agency, possibly. And yeah, heck yeah, I'm locking that down on that. That's a great draft. Jacksonville Jaguars going Azaria Thomas from Florida State. They get themselves a corner. They had the 3rd fewest interceptions in the league this season, which I figured it was definitely up there with the lowest. Unfortunately, they need more playmakers. Now, the only question here is Thomas really was not really a playmaker coming out of Florida State. He was more of a sticky man coverage guy, and that is really what he's going to be, is more on those physical. He's going to have to get stronger to be more of that physical approach, but I thought he was really, really good in coverage. Got to get it better as a tackler. They need more coverage help, though, in that secondary, besides Tyson Campbell and Jerrion Jones in the slot. Mentioning, though, with the ball production, that would be my only, nitpick with this, is if you're looking for more ball production, well, I'd go Benjamin Morrison or Siobhan Revel, who are still on the board as well. So I'm higher on those guys. I like Thomas. I really do. I think he's a really talented dude, but I would definitely go with a Revel or a Benjamin Morrison who are still available. And then we go into the Raiders here. Jackson Dart, the quarterback from Ole Miss. If you don't go quarterback in the first round, this seems like a Pete Carroll type of quarterback as well. Somebody that he can develop, who he's done a good job in prior years and past of developing these guys. And I think Jackson Dart could be the next guy in the pipeline. He's got the traits. There's no doubt about that. He's a good athlete as well. I think he's a little underrated as an athlete. And the arm talent's good enough. He's got solid arm talent. You saw him laying out those deep balls And then, ideally, maybe a little more air on the deep balls. He is maybe a little more of a flat thrower. In general, though, I think he's got the touch, especially short to intermediate range, and certainly has all the talent to be a franchise quarterback. Just you worry some of the things with the Lane Kiffin offense, how that does translate. But it is a good pick. I think it really is. And then you got the John Elway lick, too. That solidifies it. Oh, Josh Carly Jr. still on the board for the New England Patriots. Oh, my goodness. What a great pick for the Patriots. Wow, that is really, really good. So I love this one, man. They get themselves a left tackle right here with Josh Carly Jr. You get Travis Hunter in the first round. That's a really good draft for New England. This is an easy A-plus pick for the New England Patriots. Wow, that is just, I'm still astonished by some of these players that are on the board right now. But hey, combine, you have some risers, you got some fallers. And sometimes, just players who run really fast times, we got to shake it up a little bit, right? And do a little bit of excitement. Then you got Chicago Bears going Donovan Jackson, offensive tackle / guard, which would be fine for the Bears. Like, you could put him in at guard, at least compete with Braxton Jones too. But remember, they just drafted a tackle in the first round. So you're double dipping on the offensive line, which I'm okay with. You got Armin Embu in the first round, then you got Donovan Jackson. This is one way to build a stone wall in front of Caleb Williams in this offense. Overall, yeah, I'm fine. I have no problem if they want to do this, especially if they don't address offense line and free agency. Then I would 100% be looking at double dipping in the draft. It just comes down to what they do in free agency. I'm assuming they pick up at least one bona fide starter. If they don't, then, oh, yeah, I'm going double dip. Oh, no problem. And Donovan Jackson would be an excellent addition. New Orleans, they go Darius Alexander, so the ever-evasive, explosive pass rusher from Toledo. Maybe can have that Brandon Fisk effect here for this New Orleans Saints team on day 2. And they need to add more presence on that defensive front in general. Like, that is definitely a problem. They need to add more pass rush. Darius Alexander would be an excellent addition next to Brian Brzee. Maybe you get another run defender type alongside those guys, the trio, and then you're rocking good to go for the New Orleans Saints defensive interior. I'll say that. I like the pick, though. It's a good, solid one. It's a step in the right direction. And then we go on to the Bears. Nick Scorton, pass rusher / hybrid interior player, can play all across the board, especially in third down situations for the Bears. I think from a schematical standpoint, as he's mentioned here, Dennis Allen and his scheme coming over here, I think that would be a very solid pass rusher to add. So their draft of 2 offensive linemen are Armin Embu, Donovan Jackson, and Nick Scorton goes all edge rusher, or all defensive and offensive linemen. And I think that's a really good overall draft for the Bears. I do think a running back could be in play, but in this draft class, you can find a guy with that third round selection or on day 3. So it's not a concern, right? It's not a huge priority, but it is something they could look at later on. And you get 2 really good trench players, 3 great trench players for this team. I think it's a really good draft there. And then the Jets go, yes. I'm just trying not to scream right now. Let's go. That's what I'm talking about right now. Benjamin Morrison. My dreams have come true. I just tell you that right now. A dream has come true. I would literally cry if Benjamin Morrison gets here to the Jets' second round pick and they get him. I'm telling you right now, I might have to do some streaking. No, I won't do any of that, I promise. But yeah, Benjamin Morrison would be so fire here, especially in the second round. I'm comfortable taking him in the first round, much less the second round. I'm telling you, I'm tearing up right now. The tears are flowing. On to the 49ers, Landon Jackson. I have fallen in love with Landon Jackson in this offseason approach and just him as a person and what he brings to the table as an athlete from a size standpoint, production. I went back and watched his film too and really impressed. I thought he is going to be a guy I really think he's going to be a guy that is a disruptor and a big-time presence for whoever drafts him. 49ers, great pick here, going back-to-back defensive help. So, I mean, between Will Johnson and Landon Jackson, that's certainly going to add some much-needed help on their defense. I mean, they still need some offensive tackle up, so that would be my only gripe here is what did they do in free agency there? Overall, I certainly don't mind either one of these players. I think they're good, talented guys that are going to help their football team. Wide receiver could be another area they look at, too. Quinshon Judkins, the Ohio State running back, and the other Ohio State running back goes off the board. Rico Dowdle quietly rushed for over 1,000 yards, but he's now a free agent. We'll see what he gets paid in the offseason if they're unable to retain him. Then running back becomes a top-tier need, like a second-round pick for them. No matter what, it's going to be something they have to continue to address. And Judkins is going to bring that, that boom. And I actually like Dowdle a little bit. He's got some explosiveness to him. And Judkins is not a non-explosive playmaker either. He's got a little bit of that 10 to 20-yard burst you love. So Judkins certainly going to add a really good power element in that room. And I certainly don't mind this. I think Judkins is certainly going to be a good football player. I mean, will he be an elite running back? Does he have that top-end speed, breakaway speed? I don't think so, but I think J.K. Dobbins is a very reasonable comp for him, and I think he could even, barring the injuries, of course, I think he's going to be a really good player. And they got Indianapolis Colts going Carson Schlesinger, the linebacker, who is a very instinctual, rangy running mate next to Jair Franklin. I don't mind that one at all. I think that he would be a good complement and a good fit, too, for their scheme. He's somebody that I think will, ultimately could fill in for EJ Speed if they have to lose him in free agency. Yes, they do have Jalen Charles or Carlisle's, but still, like, they need to add more help into that linebacking room. So it wouldn't shock me if they spent the day 2 pick on this. And it's something I think I did yesterday, too. So I think it's very much in the cards for the Indianapolis Colts to continue to improve that linebacker position. I would love for them to add somebody that can add more pass coverage help to next to Jair Franklin, who's one of the better run defending linebackers in the NFL. Then on to the Atlanta Falcons, Siobhan Revel, one of the bigger steals in this draft. We see again another one. East Carolina cornerback who has elite traits. And the Atlanta Falcons, you go get yourself a pass rusher in the first round of Jalen Walker, and then you get Siobhan Revel in the second. The dreams are really coming true again in Atlanta. I love it. I really do. Especially, Mike Hughes, we'll see if he's retained. I don't think he'd be super expensive to retain. But Revel would certainly add another beast in that secondary to go along with A.J. Terrell. At the end of the day, though, I certainly would take Revel here. This is a BPA approach. And we go on to Ariante Ursary, the tackle from Minnesota. Will Hernandez is a free agent. I still think there's a good chance he comes back on a 1-year deal. Seems to love Arizona. But no matter what, they could improve that interior of the offensive line. And Ursary could be the long-term right tackle. So, you could stick Ursary at right guard early on, especially if you lose Hernandez. And then long-term, he could stick over at that right tackle position while he gets equated to that right side, too, because Jonah Williams has been a little banged up. And we'll see about his availability, too, going into the next season. And I just think it makes a lot of sense. Christian Jones, yeah, he's a rookie. Maybe he can develop into that right tackle of the future, so it's not like you're giving up on him. I like Ursary a lot as a guard. I really do. Even though he showed enough athleticism, I feel like at the combine where it's like, hey, maybe he can be a tackle. He certainly, teams are going to value this guy, I think, as a tackle that could end up moving inside the guard. And then the Miami Dolphins going Xavier Watts. Xavier with Javon Holland were set to be one of the highest paid safeties. They will likely leave Miami because of that. They just can't really afford him, right? Their cap space in general. They've got to move on from guys. They just recently had to move on from Kendall Fuller. And so ultimately, this makes a lot of sense. Xavier Watts would be a plug-and-play starter for them and would add another playmaker in that back end. So this is a really good move. I really do like this one. It would suck to lose Javon Holland, but if you do, you do. And then you got the Bengals going JT Tuimoloau, the edge rusher from the Ohio State University. He comes in with his savviness as a pass rusher. He's got already a couple of nice pass rush moves to his plethora, and he's going to be a really good run defender, I think, day one as well. He's not the strongest guy at the point of attack, but I think he's just so nuanced in his technical prowess that he brings to the table. And for the Bengals, he would be their Sam Hubbard type of replacement. They go back to Ohio State and get a replacement there. And then we go on to the Seattle Seahawks, Jordan Birch. Here we go. And Mike McDonald uses a multiple front. This is a perfect addition. Like I say, from a schematical standpoint, you look at it like a Jared Ivey, or a Jordan Birch, Nick Scorton. Those are all type of guys that I could see fitting perfectly into Mike McDaniel's scheme. They can play a little pass rusher on the interior on pass rushing downs, and then also play a base end, depending on the formation, early downs, things like that. Birch, really good athlete for his size and somebody that is a powerful dude. Really like that pick for the Seahawks, especially if they aren't able to retain a Uchenna Nwosu after this offseason, / Draymond Jones getting expensive now too. It makes a lot of sense in those roles. On to the Denver Broncos. You got Elijah Arroyo from Miami, the tight end. Great pick. I think this would be a dream for Sean Payton. Finding a tight end that has that elite upside, can be a big-time playmaker for Bo Nix. Certainly a big area that they have to go after. You get a running back in Amari Hampton in the first round and Elijah Arroyo. And overall, definitely helping their offense. On to the Steelers. They go Alfred Collins, the defensive tackle from Texas. Hook'em horns. And fine, this one's good. Yeah, I like this one because then you allow Keanu Benton to play more of a rushing role. I think Collins would move into more of that nose tackle role for this team because he's so strong at the point of attack. Like, that's really what he is good at. Continuing to work on more pass rush. He certainly has the upside, though. The athleticism is there with Collins. And it also gives Cam Hayward another guy where it's like you can keep him fresh throughout the season. They need to add more depth into that defense line, especially with Larry Ogunjobi possibly on the way out. Then you go on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Trey Harris, the wide receiver from Ole Miss. I really like this one too. Like, why not add another weapon in here? And if you get Trey Harris into that wide receiving room with Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan, like, that's a really, really good smoking room out there in that receiving core. And I see Trey Harris as another borderline X. Like, he is a sneaky guy. If it weren't for the injury concern, I think he'd go higher than this even in the draft. So getting a Trey Harris and having a Mike Evans on the outside, even if you lose Chris Godwin, I'm getting all these names pushed together. But anyway, yeah, I mean, if you end up losing Chris Godwin, this would be a little bit of an easier transition with that, as tough as that would be. On to the Packers, Jared Wilson. I also had this one yesterday, and I was a little worried. I'm like, okay, how high do I think Jared Wilson will go? But he is a really good athlete, and I think he could go. This is a sweet spot. Remember, this is where they drafted, around the range where they drafted Josh Myers. Hopefully, this is the time where they get it right and they get the center they want. Josh Myers, like I said, he's a really good athlete. Needs to get better with his hands. I think that is one of the biggest things. He does lunge in the blocks here and there. He has the upside. He has the talent, though, to warrant this pick with the right development. He could be a great replacement for them. Yeah, he ran a 4.84, the fastest of all the offensive linemen at the combine. On to the Chargers, Mason Taylor. Here we go. I love this one, too. I did this one. This is a great pick for the Chargers and the Bolts. We add in a really good, reliable pass catcher. And Mason Taylor, while he may not be as flashy as a Tyler Warren in terms of what he can do, and he may not be as good of an athlete as an Elijah Arroyo, he is a really solid athlete in his own right. Like, he's a really loose athlete. He's a good route runner. He can separate, and his hands are good. So that's going to be a check mark. Absolutely what they need. Buffalo Bills, TJ Sanders, okay, from South Carolina. You got another pass rusher in there on that defensive front. Now, I would still lean towards going after more of a nose type or a one tech rather than another pass rusher. So that would be my only gripe, because you got Ed Oliver, you got Dwayne Carter. Those guys can work into that. I would be looking more at a guy who can sample his feet in there, like a Jordan Phillips type, if you're looking at that and who's available currently. And you could also wait maybe till the third round for that plot. They don't have a third round pick. Maybe you trade down a little bit or whatever. Anyway, like, Sanders is a good player. Like, he's a really good athlete that can get after the quarterback. He's got some elusiveness to him and some explosiveness off the line. So he just needs to get a little bit stronger at the point of attack. Then we go on to the Carolina Panthers, Trey Amos, cornerback from Ole Miss, great value. And once again, he's copying my mock. No, I'm probably copying his mock. Who knows? But this mock draft was after I made my mock draft. So, no, I think these are just really, at this point in the draft, we're starting to see some of these fits and where it's at. So we're going to see a lot of repetitive picks out there. And Trey Amos, I would love this pick for this football team. They need to add more secondary. Mike Jackson's a free agent. And J.C. Horn's, injury history, got to make sure we keep that in prior minds. And improving the secondary has got to be a top priority for this team. And who knows, maybe even Shi Smith-Wade. He could fill into that slot role, but Trey Amos, and it would be a nice addition to go along with J.C. Horn on the outside. And then on to the Houston Texans. They go Jaden Higgins. Okay, add another big play wide receiver here, who's certainly going to add some more size with Nico Collins on the perimeter. And also another thing is Jaden Higgins does, he did play in the slot as a big slot there for Iowa State, and he certainly shows it. He's got some wiggle too for his size at 6'4", 214 pounds. Like, oh, let's go. That's that's a big time wide receiver. I think he was just under 6'4". He's like 6'3" and some 8-inch or whatever. But overall, like, a really solid selection for this team. Maybe you're looking for more of a route runner type in this role, since you got Nico Collins as your big play X. That would be my only nitpick on this pick. Overall, like, Higgins a really good value at this standpoint. I think that's where he ends up going, is somewhere in that range here. Oh, Elikai Manor. This is another team that could go after Jaden Higgins too. Add a big X outside wide receiver to go along with Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers. Certainly don't hate this pick at all. I think this would help out their offense even more and give Lamar Jackson another weapon. I think IU Manor's upside is really, really high. Just Stanford's offense was a little bit tricky. I mean, you worry about the separation ability with IU Manor, but I do think his route running is pretty dang good, actually, for a guy his size. So I'm not like worried he's going to be stiff as a board where he can't separate at the next level. And he has good speed. So that's not really a question for me. In general, I still think that interior defensive line, like, they need more help there. Offensive line is another area that this team could look at too. So those are question marks. I'd have to see. What do they do in free agency? They got Malachi Starks in the first round. Would be a nice addition for this football team too. Detroit Lions, Jonas Savaiinaea. Okay, Kevin Zeitler is set to be a free agent. If Brad Holmes does not bring back Zeitler, then you go ahead and bring in Jonas Savaiinaea, who had a great combine, faster than I thought he was going to run. He could plug right into right guard for them, and Christian Mahogany be your left guard of the future. That would be your dynamic pairing. And you're adding a lot of firepower. Mahogany and Savaiinaea actually are kind of, similar type of prospects in ways. Both mean, bad run blockers who have incredible strength profiles. So you added two of those type of beasts on that interior next to Frank the Tank Ragnow. And I don't have a problem with that one at all. And they got an edge rusher in the first round too. On to the Commanders, they go Caleb Johnson, the running back. Oh, okay. I mean, look, I will say this. It wouldn't shock me, okay? They do need an upgrade in the running back room. We talked about this one in the Washington breakdown. While Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler are not bad running backs. Austin Eckler, unfortunately, at this point, just getting a little bit older now. He's a good, solid receiving back. But, between the tackles, Brian Robinson isn't the most explosive guy. He's a tough-nosed dude, and I really like watching Brian Robinson. Is he an elite running back? No. And was Jaden Daniels a big help for their offense? Absolutely. He skewed the rushing numbers? 100%. Do they have that stud bell cow in there? No. Caleb Johnson could end up being that, and I totally respect that. I still think they have other areas that I would prioritize a little bit more. Maybe you go after running back on day 3. However, I could totally see them going after running back at some point, depending on who is on the board. And on to the Buffalo Bills, you got Andrew Makuba, the safety from Texas, going back to hook them, and they get themselves a playmaker in that back end. And hey, if they don't get anybody in free agency, I do think it's another safety, especially somebody with some speed and athletic profile to be more rangy. That's what they need. I mean, Cole Bishop certainly has some range. However, who's going to be that back end guy that can really add a ball hawk and a scary guy in that back end? I think Makuba could be exactly what this team needs. I like that fit. Chiefs go Tyleik Williams. I love this fit as well. I mean, you get a guy next to Chris Jones that's going to eat up blocks and can be their one tech on that defensive line. He is legit a perfect Spagnola guy. Can play the run tough and also has some pass rush upside. I mean, you got your superstar in Chris Jones. Now you add in a staple, hard-nosed, the Ohio State man, Tyleik Williams into that defense, especially the value. I would take him in the first round with their pick. Great pick. And then finally, I love this one too. Charles Grant, William and Mary, offensive tackle. He does only have experience at left tackle from what I know. Now, I'd have to go back into his high school days and take a look at that. But he is an elite athlete, and you got one of the best in the business. Jeff Stoutland University coming over here to be that successor at right tackle. The athletic traits, the length profile. He's 35-inch arms, or 34 and 3/4 inch, whatever, close enough. 6'5", 311 pounds, came in a lot bigger than I thought he would have. So he is a guy that if you can develop him and get those technical ass points, and as I talk about, Jeff Stoutland is the best in the business. In 2 years, it's a seamless transition. He's a young player, young prospect with a lot of upside to be an elite tackle. And I mean elite. He has all the traits. Love it for the Philadelphia Eagles. So that finishes a banger of a mock draft. Really enjoyed it. I actually kind of like the second round selections a little bit more on some of these than the first round selections. I thought the second one was really good, and some teams found some incredible steals in this draft. So yeah, let me know what you think, agree or disagree on Jordan Reed's new 2-round mock draft. I will talk to you later though here very soon with another mock draft. Let's go.